Hey guys, and welcome back to the HellfireComms Ghiblithon. Only a few more movies to go now, and the next two, including this one, are a fair bit on the long side, so we're going to cut the pleasantries and get right on into them. Today we'll be watching The Wind Rises. I guess you could call this Miyazaki's magnum opus, at least his self-proclaimed magnum opus, but let's not let prior opinions colour our current ones, especially for me, who hasn't seen the film. Alright, yeah, let's go. Yeah, it's all funny, let's go. If you need help syncing up our commentary to the movie, check the video description for instructions, otherwise we're going to get right on into it. In 3, 2, 1. Okie dokie, The Wind Rises. What you got for me, Rich?
So, The Wind Rises came out in 2013, directed by Hayao Miyazaki, and the screenplay is once again by Hayao Miyazaki. It is based on a manga of the same name that Miyazaki wrote between 2009 and 2010, which in turn is loosely based on the 1937 short story The Wind Has Risen by Tatsuo Hori. Basically, it merges two plot lines together, effectively. So, The Wind Has Risen's plotline, and then it's a fictionalized biopic of Jiro Horikoshi, who was the chief engineer of many Japanese fighter designs of World War II, including the Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighter.
Okay.
So, really, this can be seen as Miyazaki's magnum opus, because it pulls together a lot of his favourite things. It brings together planes, flight, it makes major emphasis on his pacifism, and it's a really fascinating film, I will say.
So, can we expect any, humour throughout this? Because everything I've seen of The Wind Rises makes me, or leads me to believe, rather, that's a very serious film.
It is on the whole a very serious film. I think you're probably looking at something more on the lines of Spirited Away in terms of humour, in that there's no real funny bits, at least from what I recall, but there are instances that you could perceive as being humorous. And there are elements of fantasy and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's a really beautiful film, and I will always definitely remember my first time watching it, because obviously the film came out in Japan in 2013, and I don't think that I got to see it until 2014. It was either 2014, 2015, I can't quite remember when, but I remember watching it. It wasn't too long after my granddad died, and the end of this film really did hit home for me in that respect, just because of its subject matter, and it was a bit like, oh god, my heart.
Yeah.
But that is pretty much this film and the next Ghibli film that we're going to be doing, The Tale of Princess Kaguya. Both of them are just like, hey, gut punch to the heart.
Yeah. Well, we'll cover Kaguya next time, and be sure to listen out for an Okami reference, because there will be plenty of them. Right, I'm just going to go through the Ghiblithon collection, well, the Ghibli collection list, and we'll kind of spat off, the aerial stuff in each. Nausicaa, obviously Nausicaa had her own flying device, and there were tons of ships in that.
Yes.
Laputa, Castorp, in the sky. Do I need to say more, really? Grave of the Fireflies, there was bad stuff coming from things in the sky.
Yeah.
My Neighbor Totoro, I can't recall any aerial stuff in that at all.
They flew on the top thing, and also the catbus sort of flew.
Okay, sure. Kiki's Delivery Service, of course.
Obvious.
Only yesterday kind of kept its feet on the ground, honestly.
Well, it's also because it's a Takahata film and not a Miyazaki one.
Porco Rosso, that's probably the biggest one since Laputa, honestly.
Yes.
Ocean Waves, there was a plane involved.
Not Miyazaki.
Pompoko, I can't recall any airplanes in there.
Once again, not Miyazaki.
Okay. Whisper of the Heart. I mean, there were aerial sections in it when the protagonist and the Baron flew, but
Yes?
Princess Mononoke, not that I can recall. My Neighbours, the Yamadas, there was a big old flying scene at the end when they were saying Que Sera Sera.
Yes.
Spirited Away, gorgeous aerial shots, of course. Cat Returns, plenty of aerial focus in that, especially towards the end. Howl's Moving Castle, mwah, of course. Tales from Earthsea, debatable, but again, not Hayao Miyazaki. Ponyo, that was more focused with Under the Sea than the sky, honestly. Arrietty,
Nothing aerial in that one, really.
And lastly, From Up on Poppy Hill. Now, that was more of a naval thing, really.
Yeah, but mainly Miyazaki films, you can generally see the whole thing to do with planes, and this is effectively where his love of it all comes from. Well, not necessarily where it comes from, but it's the accumulation of his love for planes and flight.
So, what time period is this set in, exactly? Because they all seem to be wearing very traditional Japanese garb.
So this is the mid-1900s. Well, right now you're looking at more perhaps 1913 and 1918 or so, like around the time of the First World War, I would say.
Okay.
Because we're looking at sort of perhaps... Oh, it's 1918 specifically when this bit is, so Jiro is 15 at this point in his life.
Bit of a hero as well. He took out that bully, like, whoa!
Oh, definitely. I mean, he's a very fascinating character, and it's even more fascinating that he is based on a real person. So, Dr. Jiro Horikoshi was born near the city of Fujioka, Gunma Prefecture, Japan in 1903. He graduated from the newly established aviation laboratory, Koku Kenkyujo, within the engineering department of the University of Tokyo, and started his career in Mitsubishi Internal Combustion Engine Company Limited, which later became Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Nagoya Aircraft Manufacturing Plant. We are going to see a lot of his life through this. This film is very heavily fictionalized.
Yeah.
It does follow the progression of his aircraft designs. It's more a biography of his work rather than a biography of his life, because he had an older brother, not a younger sister. His wife didn't go through what the love interest in this film is going to go through.
Okay.
Effectively.
I don't like the way that sentence was going. Oh, okay. He looks into the sky at night and he sees his dream, not a shooting star, but a cruising plane.
The reason that he's really loving this is because he reads about the famous Italian aircraft designer Giovanni Battista Caproni, who is effectively the guy that Jiro wants to become like. And yes, we get full on Italian accent.
Alright, let's have the cast list, mate. Who's in this little motion picture?
So Giovanni Battista Caproni is voiced by Stanley Tucci, who's obviously been in loads of stuff. Most recently, he's Merlin in the Transformers films. He is Caesar Flickerman in the Hunger Games films, and yeah, you've generally probably seen Stanley Tucci about in something or other, and he's pretty awesome. Young Jiro is voiced by Zach Callison.
Oh, Steven from Steven Universe!
Yes!
That was like a positive version of a trigger. It was like, oh, Synapse is firing, that's who that is.
Yes. So that's quite cool. I believe Kayo is his younger sister, I want to say. And she is voiced by Eva Bella, who is best known, at this point anyway, for being the voice of young Elsa in Frozen.
Oh. Is this actually happening, or is he imagining it? It's kind of hard to tell.
This is a dream sequence.
Okay.
Pretty much whenever you see Caproni, it is a dream sequence.
I gotta say, this is a nice companion film to Porco Rosso, which was also heavily Italian-themed.
Yes, but this is much more... I mean, the way I see it is it's effectively Miyazaki imprinting some of his thoughts and emotions onto Jiro Horikoshi, because it sort of feels like it's his fascination with planes and growing up loving planes. And it's like his vision of the dreams that he must have had as a kid. And it's just quite awesome and lovely.
Very impressive plane design so far, I gotta say.
Oh yeah, there's some beautiful planes in this film. They're brilliant.
Seem to recall you mentioning how intricate the design for all the aerial stuff is in the movie, so I'm going to be interested to see where the line is, how far it will go in that regard.
Well, the planes aren't necessarily going to continue to grow in how fantastical they are, but the love of planes and the specificity of everything that needs to go in to make a plane work is where there's a lot of interest.
It's weird hearing Zach's regular voice, having listened to Steven so much.
Well, that's your fault.
Yeah. Well, I was implying it was somehow not my fault. What are you getting at?
Well, no, I'm just saying that it's your fault for having watched far too much Steven Universe.
Okay, I see. The prejudice comes creeping out. I didn't know you were one of those people.
You know I'm not.
I know. I'm enjoying this so far. You were right in that it's not a really humorous film, but it's got a lot of levity to it.
Yes, it is one of those films that it's not really aimed at kids. And there is a bit of kind of whole issue around that, because after directing Ponyo, Miyazaki wanted his next film to be a sequel to Ponyo, but Toshio Suzuki said, no, why don't you adapt The Winter's Risen instead? I think because Suzuki thought it had much more grounds for being a decent film. Miyazaki at first rejected that proposal because he created the manga as a hobby and considered its subjects not suitable for children, which is obviously the traditional audience of most of Ghibli's films. But he changed his objection after a staff member suggested that children should be allowed to be exposed to subjects that they are not familiar with. And I think that is a very, very good thing to go with, because why lock kids out of learning about things just because you think it might not entirely be suitable? Obviously there is a line, you do not want to be showing an 18-rated film to a child. That's,
no, absolutely not. No.
Wholly inappropriate. But The Wind Rises, in its worst moments, in terms of what goes on, it's stuff that pretty much everyone is going to come across in some form in their lives.
Yeah.
And why not allow kids to tackle that? The film itself might be too long for kids to properly deal with it, but still. But also, something that's quite beautiful is ironic I use that word choice, but yes, Miyazaki was inspired to make The Wind Rises after reading a quote from Jiro Horikoshi, and that quote was, "All I wanted to do was to make something beautiful." And I think that's just a wonderful quote.
Guessing this is a love interest for the movie.
Effectively, yes.
You pause there. Is there something I'm not getting?
No, it's more me going, I'm pretty sure that is the love interest, but I'm trying to remember, is she definitely the love interest?
Okay, so I've confused mysticism for dumbassery.
Effectively, yes.
Oh, I'm so mean today for some reason. So who's voicing Jiro now, mate?
So, the person who is voicing Jiro right now is the amazing Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, they got a pretty damn good cast in for this one. And, I mean, obviously Joseph Gordon-Levitt's amazing, but I think he does a really good job here as well. It's awesome. I also want to point out that what Jiro was just quoting there also appeared right at the start of the film.
Yes.
It was "Le vent se lève, il faut tenter de vivre," which is "the wind rises, we must try to live" in English, and that comes from a poetic line by Paul Valéry from Le Cimetière Marin, which is the graveyard by the sea. And I think it is quite a lovely quote, but yes, earthquake!
Oh, Jesus. I actually thought they were under attack for a second, but no, it's just the Earth having it all off on one, I guess.
Well, I mean, obviously having never actually been present at an earthquake, because, I mean, to be fair, that's something that I don't really ever want to have to experience, other than, like, the minuscule earthquakes that we may or may not get.
Yeah, the ones
UK
we slate
from time to
through,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, the ones where we're just like, oh, what the heck was that? It was just like the Earth just kind of judged a tiny bit. But yeah, when you actually have a proper earthquake, like, that must be terrifying, and even though it's the Earth doing it, you must feel like you're under attack from something. In part, that would, I assume, be because a lot of us these days do have in our heads the whole thing of terror,
Yeah,
and terrorism. So our natural assumption would be, oh my god, we're under attack. And I suppose potentially in Japan at this time as well, that would have been the thought. Obviously, they weren't really that heavily involved in World War I, so it wouldn't be quite as bad.
uh-huh.
But it wouldn't surprise me if there was still that sort of worry, because obviously the war had been going on.
For a split second, I did think it had something to do with, like, bombs and whatnot, until I remember the time period.
But this is an actual earthquake that happened in history. So this is the Great Kanto earthquake, which struck the Kanto plain of Honshu at 11:58 JST on Saturday, September the 1st, 1923. Varied accounts indicate the duration of the earthquake between 4 and 10 minutes, and it had a magnitude of 7.9 on the moment magnitude scale, with its focus deep beneath Izu Oshima Island in Sagami Bay. The cause was a rupture of part of the convergent boundary where the Philippine sea plate is subducting beneath the Okhotsk plate along the line of the Sagami Trough. Damage from this natural disaster was the greatest sustained by pre-war Japan. And because the earthquake struck at lunchtime, when many people were cooking meals over fire, many people died as a result of many large fires that broke out. Some fires developed into firestorms that swept across cities. Many people died when their feet became stuck on melting tarmac. The single greatest loss of life was caused by a fire tornado that engulfed the Rikugen Honjo Hifukusho, which was formerly the Army Clothing Depot in downtown Tokyo, where about 38,000 people were incinerated after taking shelter there following the earthquake.
That's not a good word, incinerated.
Oh yeah, the earthquake broke water mains all over the city, and putting out the fires took nearly 2 full days until late in the morning of September the 3rd. There was then a strong typhoon centred off the coast of the Noto Peninsula in Ishikawa Prefecture that brought high winds to Tokyo Bay at about the same time as the earthquake, which caused the fires to spread rapidly. And yeah, many homes were buried or swept away by landslides in the mountainous and hilly coastal areas in western Kanagawa Prefecture, where about 800 people died. And a collapsing mountainside in the village of Nebukawa, west of Odawara, pushed the entire village and a passenger train carrying over 100 passengers, along with the railway station, into the sea.
Christ.
There was then a tsunami with waves of up to 10 metres high striking the coast of Sagami Bay.
It never fucking ends.
Bozo Peninsula, Izu Island, and the east coast of Izu Peninsula within minutes. The tsunami caused many deaths, including about 100 people along the Uigahama Beach in Kamakura, and an estimated 50 people on the Enoshima Causeway. Over 570,000 homes were destroyed, leaving an estimated 1.9 million people homeless. Evacuees were transported by ship from Kanto to as far as Kobe in Kansai. The damage is estimated to have exceeded $1 billion US, which would be about $14 billion today, and there were a grand total of 57 aftershocks.
I think what's most scary about this is, apart from like the lack of information, is just you hear this sound, which sounds like an old one trying to like claw its way out of the depths of the earth, and then everything just goes up in flames.
Oh, definitely. It's awful. It's times like this where I feel really glad that we live in the UK, because we have a very, very bland weather and nature system, to the point where we don't really get... Well, we don't get earthquakes, we don't really get that bad storms. Obviously we get quite bad flooding, but it's generally nowhere near the level of other places all over the globe. So we're very lucky when it comes to this sort of stuff that, at present anyway, we don't have to deal with it, and that does just make me very happy and very appreciative.
This whole earthquake situation is just reminding me of Grave of the Fireflies, but the sad part is this bit actually has hope, whereas it did not get better in that one.
Oh, definitely. Like, this is just the start of Judo's life. It's not the thing that is going to lead to the end of 2 young lives.
Gotta preserve that knowledge. Got any more voice acting trivia for us, mate?
So...
You sound like a Muppet there for a second.
I'm mostly just trying to place characters, because I'm a little bit rubbish with that.
That's fine. Just go down the list, mate.
So, we haven't met our leading lady yet, but we will do. But you've got Kiro Honjo, who we're definitely going to meet soon anyway, who is voiced by John Krasinski.
Right.
Who most well known for being Jim in the US version of The Office, and also for being married to Emily Blunt. Which is quite fitting because Emily Blunt is also in this film. It's quite cute. Judo's mother is voiced, who we have already met, I believe. She's voiced by Edie Merman, who we have already previously seen, because I think she was in... Was it Ariete?
Don't ask me, you're the one with the information.
Where is it?
It's fine, mate, just carry on, come on, stay on focus.
Either way, yes, Edie Merman, who obviously most people would know as being the voice of Gatomon and Angewwoman. as the older version of Jiro's younger sister, Kayo, you have Mai Whitman, who most people recognise as being, but also Yuffie in Kingdom Hearts 2, as well as being Roxy in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
Yeah, Scott's sister.
No.
Bugger. Wrong one. Damn it, Tom. Damn it, this is why the Scott Pilgrim game ain't being re-released.
Yeah, no. Roxy Richter is one of the evil exes. Scott's sister is played by Anna Kendrick, and she's called Stacy Pilgrim.
Yes, I'm an idiot.
Which is quite hilarious, because Anna Kendrick was older than Michael Cera, despite playing his younger sister.
Well, that happens all the time.
It does indeed. There's a character called Hattori, who is voiced by Mandy Patinkin, who most people would recognise as being Inigo Montoya in The Princess Bride, as well as being, originating numerous iconic Broadway roles, including Georges Seydoux in Sunday in the Park with George, and Che in the original Broadway production of Evita. You then have Mrs. Kurakawa, who is voiced by Jennifer Grey, who most people would recognise as being Baby in Dirty Dancing, and also the younger sister Junie Bueller in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You then have Elijah Wood as a character called Sone, I believe, obviously Frodo, which I was just like, wait a minute, Elijah Wood's in this film? Young Nahako, who I believe we've already met, is voiced by Madeline Rose Yen, and then you've got a flight engineer called David, who's played by David Cowgill, a Mitsubishi employee who's played by Ronan Farrow. You then have a character called Katayama, who is voiced by Darren Criss, who most people would recognise as being a major part of Starkid Productions, at least in their original shows, because he played Harry in Harry Potter and did loads of the music, but also as being Blaine Anderson in Glee, and he's also been on Broadway, particularly in Hedwig and the Angry Inch as Hedwig.
Okay.
And yeah, Darren Criss is pretty awesome. And then we have got a few others. So, Kurakawa is voiced by Martin Short, who most people would recognise for lots of comedy roles that he has been in. Castorp, who is voiced by Werner Herzog, who was apparently one of the world's 100 most influential people, as named by Time magazine in 2009, and is considered one of the greatest figures of New German cinema. So he's apparently quite a big one that I've actually never heard of. And then as Satomi, you have William H. Macy, who most people would recognise as playing Frank Gallagher in the US adaptation of Shameless, which I think, from what I can gather, was a pretty awful adaptation, but that generally seems to be the case whenever anybody adapts British sitcoms to the US, because it just loses everything that made it good. But apparently it's still running, so it must have had some level of success.
How many years has passed between young Jiro and adult Jiro, and how are they even going to get away with packaging them as separate characters come DLC time?
So right now, I believe we are in 1927.
Okay.
Where Judo has graduated and he's employed at aircraft manufacturer Mitsubishi. I believe that's where we are right now, anyway.
Uh-huh. They said the war has been over for 2 hours. Well, 2 hours, 2 years. Oh, it's already over. Don't slouch on the boat representation either, if you're a fan of From Up on Poppy Hill, which I always have to pause before saying because it starts with from, and that's kind of hard to work into a seamless sentence.
Yes, it is, especially when, you're starting doing a commentary and you go, it's time for Up on Poppy Hill, and I'm just like, no, Tom, that's not the name of the film. As much as I know we don't like to do retakes these days, you're going to have to do a retake, because it's from Up on Poppy Hill, not Up on Poppy Hill. Get the name of the film right.
So, what happened to their mother? Because he had a little bit of a vision back in the school, and I wasn't sure what to make of it.
I can't remember.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it.
See, I'm just a source of really helpful stuff. Like, there are times where I can go, yes, I can help you here. And other times, nope, I wasn't paying enough attention. I was too busy rattling off important facts about other things.
How dare you? How dare you contribute 75% of the commentary in these audio commentaries?
I know, I'm such a heartless sod, aren't I?
Yes, you are. Is there any particular reason they were waiting on the tracks?
I don't know whether the idea is that they were trying to jump on to catch a free ride, perhaps?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Tends to be a common thing.
Looking very dapper in that suit, Jiro. You grow up fast, mate. So now it gets into the proper core of the Wind Rises with all the business stuff. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, it's less perhaps business, more let's design planes.
Well, that is his business. What did you think I meant by it?
That's true.
Huh. What's going on here, then?
I'm going to see if I can find out, actually, because from the looks of things, there was some sort of financial crash in Japan, but I'm just going to see if I can find anything about that out.
Yeah, 'cause there was the Great Depression in America.
So this would be the Showa financial crisis, I believe, which was a foretaste of the Great Depression. And it brought down the government of Prime Minister Wakatsuki Reijiro and led to the domination of the Zaibatsu over the Japanese banking industry. It occurred after the post-World War I business boom in Japan. Many companies invested heavily in increased production capacity in what proved to be an economic bubble. The post-1920 economic slowdown and the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923 caused an economic depression, which led to the failures of many businesses. The government intervened through the Bank of Japan by issuing discounted earthquake bonds to overextended banks. In January 1927, when the government proposed to redeem these bonds, rumours spread that the banks holding these bonds would go bankrupt. In the ensuing bank run, 37 banks throughout Japan and the second-tier Zaibatsu went under. Prime Minister Wakatsuki attempted to have an emergency decree issued to allow the Bank of Japan to extend emergency loans to save these banks, but his request was denied by the Privy Council and he was forced to resign. Wakatsuki was succeeded by Prime Minister Tanaka Giichi, who managed to control the situation with a 3-week bank holiday and the issuance of emergency loans. However, as a result of the collapse of many smaller banks, the large financial branches of the 5 great Zaibatsu houses were able to dominate Japanese finances until the end of World War II.
Jeez.
So that's what happened in that one.
I've been meaning to ask, who's the composer for this? And please don't say it's Joe Hisaishi.
Well, Tom, you'll be very happy to know that it is indeed Joe Hisaishi.
Dude, let someone else compose. I get that you don't, but jeez.
I believe that it is much less a case of him not giving other people a chance, and more Miyazaki likes working with him.
Fair enough then, yeah.
And they've got a really good connection going on, so why not continue working together?
Yeah, I suppose so.
I don't know whether Miyazaki's next film will have Joe Hisaishi score it, but I have to say it would feel incredibly odd were that not to take place. I'm going to see if we have any actual information on it yet, but it is not looking likely, which is a shame. But I would very much like to see a final double act from Miyazaki and Hisaishi, because it sort of would feel wrong if they didn't do the film together at this point.
Yeah. What is that film? Just remind me, because it's not in the Ghibli collection currently.
Well, it's not even out yet, but I believe it's called How Do You Live?
I get up, I get on the computer, I edit, and I go to bed. The end.
So we'll see what happens on that front. I think the estimated time frame for it coming out is 2019 to 2021. So we will see what happens. But it would be nice to... I mean, fingers crossed, it does end up being an amazing film. I have no doubt that it will be, but I think the reason part of me is ever so perhaps slightly concerned is because I feel that The Wind Rises was almost Miyazaki's best hope for a swan song. Like, it's a brilliant swan song for him, and it sort of does make you then concerned of just going, oh, please don't make your last film one that's not as good. Just because then that would just be really depressing. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I was perhaps a little concerned when I knew that When Marnie Was There was going to be Ghibli's sort of last film. Because, and this is not to say that When Marnie Was There is a bad film. It's actually really good and I really love it. It's just that with, like, The Tale of Princess Kaguya felt like a sort of perfect swan song that could sort of never be topped by later Ghibli films, perhaps, I feel. And so it sort of felt like anything that comes after it is going to be really heavily looked upon in contrast. And obviously every film after it was going to be very different, no matter what. But it's just that whole thing of sometimes you kind of have to get out while the going's good.
Mm-hmm.
And on a high note, because the last thing that anybody wants is to see the way that they're remembered dwindle into, ooh, it's a bit crap. Basically, I would say if you're going to look at anyone who kind of did that, sort of George Lucas with Star Wars, in the sense of, obviously, the original trilogy was like really well received, everyone really loves it. And then he decided to go back to it and keep going, and then the prequel trilogy was a bit of a disaster in terms of how it was perceived, and now pretty much whenever anybody looks at George Lucas, they're kind of just like, you're not actually as good as we thought you were. And that's a shame, because obviously the original trilogy was really good.
Well, Return of the Jedi was...
Well, yes, there is that one, but Return of the Jedi is better than pretty much most of the prequel trilogy, and that's someone who grew up with the prequel trilogy and therefore should arguably like it a bit more, but then I know that there are people who will defend the prequel trilogy.
I wouldn't go full stand for it, but there's good stuff in there. Also, once episode 9 comes out and is, fully available on Blu-ray, etc., I think we'll have a bit of a Star Wars marathon.
That would be good, yes.
Come in for a landing now. Don't pull a tails and crash on Emerald Coast. He's confident. He's made all the correct calculations. It will work. I thought that was pretty good. Like, you know, lower your standards a little bit.
Well, no, but the whole thing is that they're aiming to really succeed with it. And so now I remember who Kurokawa is, and now I'm thinking, I recognise that voice and I recognise that name. And the reason for that, I believe, is because... Come on, please prove me correctly. God damn it, I was going to say that he was in The Incredibles. He's not. However, he is in Treasure Planet as the voice of Ben.
Yes, I know who you were thinking of. It's Sean Wallace, I believe.
Yes, that's the one.
It's the character design, isn't it? He looks like Mr. Incredible's boss.
Yes, and Martin Short does actually quite sound like him as well, so... It's one of those cases where you have kind of actors who have very similar ranges, and it's quite nice. But yes, there we saw one of the big moments in Jiro Horikoshi's life, and that was the flawed Mitsubishi 1MF-10. That was an experimental aircraft that never passed the prototype stage after some flight tests.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously that happened and it just got pretty much completely buggered over.
Understandable, jeez. Well, that's how business works.
Yes, but it's just the way things roll.
Well, at least he's not fired.
It's very true, and this will hopefully help in somewhat. So we're now basically in 1929, and we get to see 1929 Germany, which would obviously be a very fascinating place.
Yeah, very much so.
Because effectively that's before Hitler started to kind of properly get his claws in. Like, he was starting, but it wasn't really that bad in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, there were a lot of issues.
Mm-hmm.
But 1924 to 1929 is called the Golden Era of Germany. Because civil stability had been restored. Basically, I mean, so Hitler had released or dictated Mein Kampf to that point. So the reign was starting, but there was a period of calm and peace. And there was a remarkable cultural renaissance in Germany in the 20s. I think because they were starting to kind of get out of that funk that had arisen because of their loss in World War One. But then obviously a lot of stuff then went on to happen.
Yeah, well, we're massively simplifying it, but...
Massively simplifying it, but also we are going to effectively cover that part of history in this film.
God, it's like the last few days before Christmas. Well, it's a week to the day we're recording this, and still fasting. Still haven't had any Christmas food and whatnot. My mouth is fucking watering.
And you see, I've just been having loads of chocolate, because I've just kind of
motherfucker.
given up at this point. Like, really, I should be looking after me body and just going, no, you need to lose this pot belly that has developed. But then it's also just like, well, I know that I'm not actually going to do that over Christmas, so I might as well just enjoy my food now, and then in the new year be like a crazy person, and do what everybody does and say, no, this year is the year that I'm going to get fit and healthy, and completely lie to myself that that is going to be the thing that's going to happen. But at least it means that I get to enjoy my food.
You're such a bastard. You're such a fucking bastard. You've got the cute face to be able to get away with having a pot belly. Mr. Red Boulder with pimples over it cannot.
Well, no, I can't really. I need to get back... well, I'm never going to get back to the days where I was basically a stick. Because I used to be one of those really annoying people who could just eat anything and would stay remarkably skinny. I think I just had a really, really fast metabolism.
Yeah, those people can go to hell.
Yeah, but then as I have gotten older, said metabolism has evidently slowed down quite a lot. And, yeah, it's piled on. Part of it might actually be, I'll blame this on antidepressants, because they can also make you fat.
Yes, they can.
I'll put the blame on them for the extra weight. But fingers crossed, in the new year I can come off those and see how that goes.
Well, we got to Germany easily enough with that transitional comedy, or commentary even, whichever you make the distinction, and now we're getting some proper aeroplane porn.
Mm-hmm. So yes, Jiro has come to Germany to meet and understand German plane design. And this is all to do with Hugo Juncker, who was a German aircraft engineer and aircraft designer in the late 1800s and early 1900s. He was the founder of what would become Juncker's Flugzeug und Motorenwerk AG, following the First World War's armistice, and he was one of the mainstays of the German aircraft industry in the years between World War I and World War II. In particular, his multi-engined, all-metal passenger and freight planes helped establish airlines in Germany, as well as all over the world. And although his name is linked to some of the most successful German warplanes of the Second World War, Hugo Juncker himself had nothing to do with their development, because he was forced out of his own company by the Nazi government in 1934 and died on his 76th birthday in 1935. So it's not the happiest end to his life.
Oh, shit! I like Jiro. He's a good protagonist.
Oh, hell yeah, he's got that really nice balance of intellect and charm, and seemingly, at least anyway, just being a nice person. That's the way he comes across, and that's just great.
He's a prodigy without being pretentious, and that always helps make the superior intellect go down easy.
Exactly, yes.
Well, I'm embarrassed now. Sorry, Mr. Japanese man. You can indeed look around the hangar. Oh, look at that shit. It
looks like corrugated iron, really, doesn't it?
It does a little bit. It's a fascinating design. I think this movie is going to get a pretty high grade just in terms of just the visual design, really. You can really see what made all these crafts appeal to Miyazaki so much.
Oh yeah, it's it's like perfect plane porn. Not actual plane porn, because obviously that would be really freaking disgusting.
Ugh.
But plain porn is in like food porn, of where you look at something and you're just like, yes, that is a mighty fine engine, and like I would want to fly that one day. I realise that this statement is just getting sort of worse as I go along, but you get the gist of where I was coming from, hopefully.
I do. And you know, aircraft on that scale has always been a thing in video games as well. Like, you've got, what is it, the High Wind in Final Fantasy VII, the airship?
Yep, you are indeed correct. Named after its owner, Sid Highwind.
The Sid who keeps, like, reincarnating or some shit in each game.
Yes, basically.
Sorry, I was lost in thought there. I ain't got time for your nicotine addiction. I'm too busy with mine. My mom does that a lot. Like, try and pick out an already dead cigarette or a fag. Not that type of fag. It's a euphemism for a cigarette. And just try and relight it.
Well, it's not a euphemism. It's just a
Oh, it's an idiom.
Slang. Or idiom, yes. Flying radiator, that would be quite an impressive feat if you ask me.
Jeez, that's a lot in terms of technology. You may as well... You're basically a child trying to fight an adult at that point.
Yes, but also you would be surprised at how many places do end up being surprisingly far behind the times when it comes to a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Especially in business, because, I mean, where I used to work, one of our, like, ongoing jokes amongst ourselves was that we were effectively still living in the 1900s. Like, basically, where we were was about maybe, like, the 1980s, whereas everyone else was, like, firmly in the 21st century. It's just like, yeah, it would be nice if we could actually get with the times. Be nice, but obviously, when you've got cultural institutions or businesses that have been around for a very long time, sometimes getting them to get with the times can be a massive uphill struggle.
His friend's a very cynical one, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
What's going on here, then?
I think you can probably guess what's going on here, Tom.
Yeah.
Yep, this is the secret police chasing after someone who they believe to be Jewish in, obviously, what is the beginning of the Holocaust.
Fuck me. I wasn't actually expecting that in the film. I should have. I knew the time period the film took place in.
Yeah, and I think it's something that really does work in The Wind Rises' favour, is that it doesn't necessarily spend a large amount of time on issues like that, but it's not afraid to shy away from them and say, yes, this is a thing that happened.
Jeez, that's one hell of a big metaphor right there.
Mm-hmm.
I was having the most wonderful dream, where my country was revealed to be pretty sucky at developing planes, and then there was a train in the background for some reason.
Yeah, and, like, everything's just going to shit, so Yay!
He has big things in his future, I guess.
Yes.
Love me a good train. I think we've discussed this already, though.
Probably yes. I mean, trains are good. I've never been the biggest fan of steam engine trains, if only because they can be very, very, very shaky. And the one time that I've been on a steam train, it was not the most pleasant of experiences. Because I just remember it being really hot and getting shaken everywhere, and it was not good. Much happier with normal planes. It's just more normal planes, more normal trains.
Mm-hmm.
There's too many planes in this damn film.
I want that on the front of the box, the Blu-ray.
There's too many planes in this damn film. Well, thankfully, the Blu-ray of the film was released pretty much when it came out, as you would expect. But there's a bit of complication in terms of the current rights to it. So, Disney's North American rights to Ghibli films expired in 2017, but, and obviously most of them transferred over to G-Kids, but they said that they wouldn't re-release the movie because it wasn't intended for children, and obviously their whole brand is kids, so the rights effectively still remain with Touchstone Home Entertainment, and so basically Disney. So it's a bit complicated, that one.
Yeah.
But I suppose it's one of those things. It depends what people want. I mean, if you look at the whole Disney buying all the rights to 20th Century Fox stuff, like, obviously, I think that'll all be fine, but you can understand certain elements of trepidation when it comes to films like Deadpool and Logan and the future of franchises dealing with that sort of stuff, because Disney as a whole doesn't really do that sort of stuff. They don't do R-rated in the grand scheme of things.
Well, let me stop you there. They have
said, yeah, they have said that they are going to leave Deadpool as R-rated. They're happy for that to happen, and they're quite excited to explore that possibility. So it's one of those things where you end up with a bit of an awkward thing of there's the trepidation going into it, but it's a case of you just got to see what actually results from those decisions that have been made, because obviously we as puny mortals who pay money to go see films, or buy them as Blu-rays or stream them on the internet, we don't really have a say in those sorts of things. So it's a case of see what happens and vote with your feet.
Yeah. I gotta say, I love these Imagine spots.
Oh yeah, I think they're particularly fascinating because it's all to do with being up in the air and the beauty of flight and aeronautics. And
I mean, it's a very subtle metaphor, or a way to say even that Jiro's mind is always in the sky. It's never really on the ground.
Oh, definitely. And yeah, they're just really touching, poignant moments that just show the magic that inspires Miyazaki and Jiro. I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment that artists are only, like, creative for 10 years. Because obviously there are many artists that have succeeded over many decades.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose if you look at perhaps, like, some of the biggest artists, they do have their decade of spotlight, and then they do dwindle in terms of popularity, and that's just life.
Different philosophies, really. Someone can be a creator for life, someone can use it all up and then burn away in the span of a decade.
Pretty much, yeah.
Moving up in the world.
Yes, so we're now in 1932.
Oh dear, getting close.
Yes.
I like how he just gets on with shit, you know? It's nice to see a proactive protagonist.
Oh yeah, he's got his mind focused on what he wants, and he's going to go get it no matter what. And that is certainly something that you can very much appreciate in any sort of protagonist, as long as they're not a dick about doing it.
Yeah, very much so. I'm just gonna say right now, I do have a fear of heights. You couldn't pay me enough money to get in one of those things.
Well, especially not when it's going through testing and it does things like this.
Why did they have to test it? Aren't there stuntmen for this?
I mean, you would think so, yes, and obviously Jiro can't be a pilot because of his nearsightedness, but... oh well. So yeah, I believe we've now shifted quite quickly to 1933, because this is the Mitsubishi 1MF10.
That chocks away and all that.
So, I actually got some fun facts with this. So, the Mitsubishi 1MF10 was a prototype monoplane. Two were built for the Imperial Japanese Navy, but both were lost in crashes with no production following. And I'm just trying to see if there's anything extra. Although the design was advanced, it was rejected by the Japanese Navy, having poor handling and not meeting the performance requirements of the specification. It did form the basis of more advanced designs, however, with Horikoshi using elements of it, such as the box spar in the later successful Mitsubishi A5M fighter of a similar layout.
Yeah.
So, effectively what I think Horikoshi did throughout his career is kind of hone in on the idea. It's like he's got the idea in his head and he knows what he wants to get out of it, but it's very much a case of having to iterate on those ideas and quickly, well, not necessarily quickly, but slowly but surely get better and get closer to the design that is going to be perfect.
It's building up to something here. Alright, we are good to go.
Yep, although I have the feeling this isn't necessarily going to go as well as he would like.
When does it ever, mate? Let's be honest here.
This is true.
I wonder if he knew that it wasn't going to work out before the plane's wheels left the ground, or if he just hoped.
My suspicion is that he hoped that it would be okay, because one of the annoying things about when you are making something is that oftentimes you don't know whether it is going to succeed until you actually finish it and you test it, because there are a lot of things that you physically cannot test for when you're making something. Like, you can think, right, is this working as it should do? Is this working as it should do? And it probably is, but the second you put it into action, certain things can come up that you weren't expecting.
Mm-hmm. It's very striking, that white suit. Iconic, even.
Definitely, yes.
She won't forget this. In fact, I'd wager that we found our love interest for the film.
We have indeed. This is the love interest for the film, Nahoko, and she is voiced by the delightful Emily Blunt, who's obviously been in a ridiculous number of things and is just consistently awesome.
So where is Jiro based now, exactly?
So what's happened is that he's disappointed in the failure of his previous design, and so he goes to a summer resort in Karuizawa to rest. So Karuizawa is in the Nagano prefecture, and it's located on an elevated plain at the foot of Mount Osama, which is one of Japan's most active volcanoes. Interesting place to decide to go on your holiday, but
yeah.
I think during this time it was pretty okay.
Dormant, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it was still active, but in the 1910s it began to attract the attention of expatriates and the Japanese, and before the 1940s, the most recent thing that is brought up is on August 1st, 1923, when the village of Higashinakakura gained town status to become the town of Karuizawa. So that was the last thing that really was important that happened there before the 40s and the war. And I should point out that this is ultimately where the key difference one of many key differences occurs in Jiro Horikoshi's life with this film. Because at no point did he, well, at least I don't believe he met his wife under these circumstances. and also it kind of it just has nothing to do with the plot that is going to occur. Once again, annoyingly, I can't actually tell you what the actual story of The Winter's Risen is, because it hasn't been revealed yet.
Aww. Maybe you should have gone and sat with him. That would be cool. Although we can't get to that point in the movie at this point in the movie, I suppose.
It's true, because it isn't now, but at some point in the very near future, it will be now. So we'll get there.
What a weird statement. It makes sense, but at the same time, it doesn't.
It's one of those things with time, like, time as a concept doesn't actually really make sense, because when I said sense, that's now in the past, even though it sort of feels like now, but it's something that has now been and gone, and every word that I'm just about to say is going to happen in the future, but the second I say it, it's suddenly the present, and then the second that I've said it, it becomes the past, and yeah, time's a mess.
We die every second of every day. There are billions of us dying every single week.
Yes, you really did just make that a bit more depressing than I had initially intended. I could probably slightly top you on that, of saying technically we are dying every day because every day our cells are dying, and you're probably shedding millions of dead cells every few hours at least, so yeah, that's a slightly awful thing to think about.
In summary, entropy's a bitch. The end.
Pretty much, yes.
So is she part Japanese then?
No, I think she's full Japanese, because she's called Nohoko Satomi. No, I think it's Japanese anime. That's your key. Pretty much, even though people are quite obviously Japanese, in anime they pretty much always look white, but that's just design.
Aww. Getting the feels, Rich. I'm getting the feels.
Oh yeah.
Aww. Beautiful.
Oh, I do love a good rainbow. I have to say, I'm always particularly impressed when I see a double rainbow, and annoyingly, my brain does just go very memey at that point, because
I was gonna say, yeah.
double rainbow all the way across the sky. Yeah, yeah, so intense. See, that's where my brain goes whenever I see a double rainbow. But it's always a really fascinating phenomenon to see.
Yeah, I think our attention span has waned. Please show me another bit of aeroplane porn. I need it.
Yeah, we're probably not necessarily going to get any aeroplane porn for a little bit. It is now time for the relationship portion of the film, which is just really sweet and lovely, and it's kind of annoyingly not actually part of Horikoshi's story, but it is still a lovely thing to witness.
Oh, it's the man with the striking grey eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Hang on, is that Werner Herzog?
Yes, that is.
I think there was a character based on him in the Boondocks, which is a cartoon, and he kind of spoke and acted the same, but wasn't like Werner Herzog. Obviously, it was a parody, and he had a similar like visual design. That's what tipped me off.
Well, apparently, the character of Mr. Castorp, is named after the protagonist of Thomas Mann's novel The Magic Mountain, which is a novel that the characters frequently discussed throughout the film. So that's a German novel first published in 1924 and is widely considered to be one of the most influential works of 20th century German literature. And the character design is, or at least the character himself, is a caricature of former Ghibli employee Stephen Alper, who actually returned to Japan to voice the character in Japanese, I believe, which is really awesome. So, he was a member of the board of directors of Ghibli and had served as head of overseas operations for 15 years. So that's quite a nice little touch, and I suppose adds to that whole thing of The Wind Rises being Miyazaki's swan song, in calling back to someone who used to be obviously a huge part of Ghibli.
Jeez. Oh boy, I thought it was going to turn into an Arietti situation there. Like, I never saw her again.
Yeah, no, it's much more complicated than that.
Is it really a fever, or is it something along the 9-month sort of line of thought?
It's definitely not along the line of a 9-month sign of thoughts. Definitely not. I think you're getting a bit ahead of yourself there, mate.
Sorry, I didn't mean to force Jiro down the path he wasn't comfortable with yet. His true love is planes right now. Got very serious and contemplative for a bit there.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's in that point in his life where the thing that he thought he was good at and believed he could do, he sort of failed in his two big moments, and that's obviously not going to sit well with him, because, I mean, any time that you do something big and you just fall flat on your face, it's always really difficult to pick yourself back up from that.
Yeah, very much so. I guess I'll just sit out here and admire the stars again. Maybe it will trigger another flashback or an imagined spot. What was this film rated? Because it has no compunctions about sharing smoking.
I believe that it is a PG, but I'm just going to double check that. Actually, what am I doing checking on the internet? I can just turn around and look at the bloody box. Yes, it's a PG.
Okay, makes sense.
I think the reason that it gets away with it is because at the time period it's set in, like, this is the period of time where everyone smoked, so it would seem odd did Jiro not do that. Obviously, it's not entirely appropriate to sell that to kids, and I believe that it is one of the things that people did have a little bit of a problem with. I think, I'm not 100% sure. There was controversy surrounding the film. So, in Japan, The Wind Rises received criticism from the political right and from the Japan Society for Tobacco Control. Miyazaki added to the controversy by publishing an article in which he criticised the proposal by Japan's centre-right Liberal Democratic Party to change the constitution of Japan, which irritated nationalists. Some commentators were unhappy that a warplane engineer was the film's protagonist. In an interview with Asahi Shimbun, Miyazaki said he had very complex feelings about World War II since, as a pacifist, he felt militarist Japan had acted out of foolish arrogance. However, Miyazaki also said that the Zero plane, which is something that obviously they created, represented one of the few things we Japanese could be proud of. They were a truly formidable presence, and so were the pilots who flew them. So obviously the reason that the Japan Society of Tobacco Control got involved is because pretty much consistently in the film, Jiro is smoking. And obviously, if you're younger and you're watching this, it sort of suggests that smoking is okay, when obviously it can do pretty nasty stuff to your innards.
I mean, it's just presented as a thing. It's not,
thankfully.
glorified, it's not demonised.
Yeah, it's just a thing that happened, and I think that is the best way to deal with it, because that is what happened in this time. I mean, it was the done thing, it was the cool thing. They didn't think that there were any health issues with smoking. In fact, I'm pretty sure there are things that said if you smoke, you're going to feel better, because that's just what they did to sell things.
Oh yeah, there was the whole thing about doctors smoke and they're smart, etc.
Exactly. So, times change, and it would be ridiculous to look back at it and say, well, they were stupid for falling for that, because I'm pretty sure that there's stuff that we're falling for right now in this day and age that people will look at in a few decades' time and just think, good God, they were gullible.
Interesting way to get to the paper aeroplane off the ground. I never thought about using an elastic band.
Well, yeah, because it's that whole slingshot manoeuvre. I don't think many paper planes would probably pull off quite such spectacular manoeuvres. But...
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's a little bit dangerous. I will say this is just a really cute sequence because it's mostly just told through that music.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's just thoroughly charming.
Ah, young love.
It's that whole idea of a whirlwind romance, and it is just really beautiful to witness.
Not entirely sure whether Werner Herzog could play the piano, but let's just roll with it. Showing off now, Chiro, just because she can sing in other languages and, like, plan planes almost perfectly. Ugh, I hate him. I hate him!
So this particular song is called Das gibt's nur einmal, which is It Only Happens Once. And it was composed by Werner Richard Hyman for the German movie, which I'm probably going to really butcher the name of, but De Kongress-Tanz, which is the Congress Dances, which was produced in 1931. Particularly well achieved. Well, it was a well achieved move in Ufa being someone important. His attempt to challenge US supremacy in the European film arena, taking advantage of the introduction of sound. So effectively, it was probably one of the earliest talkies in that sense. And there's a quote here at the sort of bottom of the first bit of this page, which is, "This truffle of cinema unfolds its flavours like a heavenly feast for the anonymous millions it is dedicated to." So that's quite a nice little reference.
Oh, fuck me. It just couldn't be that happy, could it?
Of course not. So yes, this is the crux of Nahako Tsutomi's story. She has tuberculosis, and now at last I can finally tell you the story of The Wind Has Risen. Japanese novel by Hori Tatsuo, written between 1936 to 37, and it is set in a tuberculosis sanitarium in Nagano, Japan, and follows a main character identified only with the pronoun I, as he takes care for his fiancée, then wife Setsuko, who has been diagnosed with tuberculosis, deciding to stay with her until her death.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the title comes from that same poem that I mentioned earlier, and the protagonist recites that to Setsuko when they meet under a tree while she's painting, as a sudden strong gust of wind occurs. The main character meditates about life and death as he sees his beloved's condition deteriorating, finally moving with her to a sanatorium surrounded by beauty, and finally discovering, just like the wind rises, he can still keep living after her death, through the strong bond of their love. Setsuko was modelled after Hori's own wife, Ayako Yano, who died of tuberculosis barely a year after their wedding, and who he accompanied to her death after a stay of a few months at a sanatorium at the foot of Mount Yatsugatake in 1935. That effectively forms the basis of Nahako's story, so you can probably tell exactly where it's going to end. But I should also point out that Nahako's name is borrowed from the female protagonist of another novel by Tatsuo Hori, which is Nahako. So they're basically pulling from a variety of different areas in that sense.
You need to get good instead of, like, snidely saying his ideas are good. Passive-aggressive piece of shit.
Well, you see, it's the whole thing of going, you know, that's a really good idea. Shit, I wish I had thought of that one, you bloody clever git. I hate you, but I love you because you're my mate, and well done, but I wish I had thought of that, for God's sake.
Yeah, I was taking it the wrong way on purpose. It was a joke. A joke. I can't not think of Mr. Incredible's boss, honestly.
I can't either. It's that whole thing of being a really short man who's very angry and having basically small man syndrome.
Right, so where are we at time-wise in the movie now?
So, I believe we're still in 1933-ish.
Okay. Huh. So are they having to work in secret or something?
Effectively. So, I don't know whether it's fully been explained yet, but I'll just mention it anyway. So, Castorp, the gentleman who was obviously at the resort, was someone who was privately critical of the Nazi regime. And because of that, and obviously at the time, Germany's and Japan's rulers were beginning to work more closely together. And obviously, because Castorp was critical of the Nazi regime, he had to flee. He was fleeing arrest by the Japanese secret police. And obviously, because Jiro met and spent some time with Castorp, and obviously because he was a plane designer, Jiro then has to hide so that they don't try and find him.
Well, you probably weren't too far off before he met Naoto, honestly.
Pretty much, yes. I mean, it's one of those things where some people seem like they're going to be alone forever until they meet that one person, and obviously for Jiro, that is Naoko.
Yeah. I got the name wrong, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. I think you called her Nato. That is Persona 4.
I fucking know who that is. Don't make it worse.
I mean, they start and end with the same syllable, so it could be worse.
So is that not Werner Herzog then? Was I just being a big goof?
No, yeah, that was Werner Herzog, but the character's name is Castorp.
Okay.
He's voiced by Werner Herzog.
Okay. Oh, I thought it was meant to be him, because it's partly historical as well.
Oh no! Because Werner Herzog was born in 1942.
Okay, well, oh my god, yeah.
So, be a bit out of time there. He wasn't born at this point in time.
Yes, I got the message, thank you. Gee, oh my god, I didn't expect it to be that graphic.
Well, that is what happens when you have a long hemorrhage. It's pretty awful. I think you can probably begin to see part of the reason why I was quite affected by the end of this film.
Yeah.
Because my granddad died from lung cancer, and obviously it's not tuberculosis, but it's still stuff to do with the lungs, and yeah, it was a hard watch, but it was one that I feel it's just very well done.
Mm-hmm. Alright. Just mentally and spiritually preparing myself for the worst here. He's even doing work on the ride down. Is that just because he likes his work so much, or yeah, he's trying to distract himself?
Pretty much, yes. I mean, you're on a train journey to see your beloved who's suffered from a lung hemorrhage, which is a pretty nasty thing to suffer from. And how do you cope with that journey? Because you'd just be sitting there doing nothing, especially at this time in history. Like these days, you would just be able to plug into like your phone and just listen to something and just try and block everything out.
Yeah.
But obviously, you couldn't do that at this time in history, and so obviously the only way that he could think of blocking things out was to continue doing his work.
He's here now. That's all that matters. Aww. Oh. Am I detecting a hint of anger though? Probably just because he has a stern face.
I think, yeah, he does just have a stern face. Obviously, he sees his daughter's in love, but the thing that she doesn't want is to be a burden. But she loves him, and he loves her, and you can see he wants them to be together, but he doesn't want them to go through that heartbreak.
And he's also witnessed that heartbreak firsthand before with his wife.
Yeah.
Dude's got a righteous mustache, I gotta say.
It is a pretty spectacular mustache. It's like one of the most impressive mustaches I've seen in this film. Probably the most impressive mustache. I mean, that guy had a pretty good mustache in the background.
Okay, let's not oversell it there. Jeez. That was impressive at the time, but it's kind of dwarfed by today's technology, I think.
Oh yeah, but obviously at the time this would have been amazing.
Very sleek little thing, isn't it?
And have you noticed how it effectively looks like the design that Caproni wanted to design all that time ago in that dream sequence, and also the paper planes that Jiro has been throwing?
Very much so. Metaphors don't usually escape my gaze, mate.
Good. I'd be worried if they did.
Shit, I'm getting pumped now. Yeah, I need a refresher course on rivets, personally.
So, right. So a rivet is a permanent mechanical fastener. So basically, it's something that you drill into metal things to keep them together. And generally, what happens with rivets is that you have a bit that sticks out for the primary purpose of being able to then unscrew them and screw them should you need to. What is being suggested here is flush rivets. So something that is flush means that it is effectively parallel with the surface. So rather than having a bit that sticks out, it's just completely flat.
I got you.
And when you look at the surface, that's the whole idea of it.
So is she at the sanatorium now?
Yes, she's at an alpine sanatorium. Because obviously that was how they thought that you could help sort out tuberculosis, or at least lessen the effects.
Oh, no, she's looking a lot better now.
Yes, but I don't think it's going to last, because effectively she's just decided, you know what? I can't bear to be apart from Jiro any longer.
Lovely little alpine village, I'll give it there.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. So yeah, with tuberculosis, generally affects the lungs. Most infections do not have symptoms, in which case it is known as latent tuberculosis. About 10% of latent infections progress to active disease, which, left untreated, kills about half of those infected. The classic symptoms of active tuberculosis are a chronic cough with blood-containing sputum, which is like spit, I think, fever, night sweats, weight loss. The historical term consumption, which is effectively tuberculosis, came about due to the weight loss. Infection of other organs can also cause a wide range of symptoms. So prevention of tuberculosis involves screening those at high risk, early detection and treatment of cases, and vaccination with the Bacillus calmette-guerin vaccine. Those at high risk include household, workplace and social contacts of people with active tuberculosis. Treatment requires the use of multiple antibiotics over a long period of time, but antibiotic resistance is a growing problem with increasing rates of multiple drug-resistant tuberculosis. 1/3 of the world's population is thought to be infected with TB. New infections occur in about 1% of the population each year. In 2016, there were more than 10 million cases of active TB, which resulted in 1.3 million deaths. This makes it the #1 cause of death from an infectious disease.
In the grand scheme, 10 million isn't a lot, because there's over 7 billion people on the planet, but it's still a fucking hefty sum.
Well, 10 million is about 1/6 of the UK population. Because the UK population is like 66 million. So, yeah, that's quite insane. More than 95% of deaths occurred in developing countries, and more than 50% in India, China, Indonesia, Pakistan and the Philippines. Thankfully, the number of new cases each year has decreased since 2000. But about 80% of people in many Asian and African countries test positive for TB, while 5 to 10% of people in the US population test positive on the test for it. So yeah, it's just unfortunate.
Oh. I kind of like the boss character. I expected him to be a lot more abrasive, but he's kind of supportive.
Yes, he's that type of abrasive boss who has a heart of gold. Like, he will have a go at you, he will shout and scream, but he will always have your back. And the only reason that he shouts and screams is because he wants to get the best out of people, and that's how he thinks that he needs to go about doing it. But through thick and thin, he will be there, and I think that tends to be... that they always tend to be the bosses that I think seem to succeed quite often. Because you fear them, but you respect them, and because they respect you, you then develop a sort of relationship with them that then allows you to just get on with it. So it doesn't... the shouting and the moaning doesn't then affect you, because it's just like, it's not personal, it's just... that's just how he speaks. Obviously, it's never pleasant when you end up in a situation like that, but if you get that sort of working relationship going, then you tend to come out better for it.
Yep. See, just what we were talking about there, you know. Doing the super traditional, and she's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any significance of the type of flower she's wearing in her hair?
I'm not sure.
I was just wondering if there was a double meaning or something.
I mean, there probably is. If you just bear with me a few seconds.
No, Richie, it's fine. Come on, mate, just enjoy the movie. His insatiable lust for knowledge. I can't stop him.
It's because I really like the language of flowers. It's just something that I do find to be quite fascinating.
That's alright, yeah.
So it might be an anemone, which is for sincerity. I'm just going to see if there's any other things. So it could be a cherry blossom for kindness, gentleness, or the transience of life, and in fact that would probably work quite fittingly with the whole transience of life idea. There's also potentially, it could be a gardenia, which is for secret love.
Uh-huh. That would fit pretty well.
That would be quite a good one. There's also the white poppy, which is for rejoicing, which would be quite fitting as well, considering it was their wedding. There's also the white rose, for innocence, silence, and devotion. So yeah, the language of flowers is beautiful.
Yeah, we're not allowed to see that scene. It's too precious. It's too pure.
Of course.
Oh, is this his sister?
Yes, this is indeed his sister.
I'm gonna say, if he's gonna get married, the family has to know about it sooner or later.
Well, I mean, you'd hope so, yes.
So she said she wanted to be a doctor, am I correct?
You are indeed correct, yes.
Let's see how that went. Yay! She did it! Oh my. Yeah, she would know, wouldn't she, being a medical student?
Yep.
There's that stoicism.
Yep.
He's making the best out of a bad situation. Yeah, I can applaud him for that, I guess.
Well, because they both want to spend their time together. Because clearly she's not going to live forever, and every day that they do have together is one more day.
Twist the fucking knife, why don't you? God damn Miyazaki.
Yep.
Well, I suppose it's cool that he can work from home, like literally right next to her.
Yes, although it doesn't probably help that he's got to do this, well, at home, because obviously that means that he's not really focusing on her. But at least it means that they are getting to spend time together, and she's getting to see him do the thing that makes him happy. And he's happy because he's getting to spend the time with her.
It's a good job he's right-handed, I gotta say.
Very good, but then to be fair, most people are, so that works out quite nicely.
They're a good couple. I like this film.
They're a wonderful couple, and I know that obviously it never happened in reality, but it's just such a wonderful story, a heartbreaking story, but a wonderful one, and it's one of the reasons why I am very, very, very glad that Toshio Suzuki said to Miyazaki, no, do The Wind Rises, rather than doing Ponyo 2, because I think that this is, on the whole, it's a much more accomplished film, and it's got much better relationships, much better characters, and on the whole, it's just a much more interesting watch.
Yeah, what would Ponyo 2 even be about?
About Ponyo and the little boy that she's sort of meant to be in love with, / he's meant to be in love with her growing up. I don't know, but it'd be awful and I'd hate it. And also, part of me feels like doing a direct sequel to a Ghibli film would just be wrong. Like, every Ghibli film, bar obviously Whisper in the Heart and The Cat Returns, they're all their own things. And even then, Whisper of the Heart and The Cat Returns are only linked through a couple of characters, and the fact that it's classified as a spiritual sequel. The plots bear no resemblance and have no real connection other than the Baron and Muta.
If they were going to do something Ponyo related, I'd prefer a prequel focusing around Fujimoto and Grandma Mir.
Yeah, I think that would be better, but I'm quite glad that that idea died, because...
Well, hear me out, I've got an idea for this. No dialogue. Well, basic, little to no dialogue, just all done through, like, music and visuals. A little bit like Fantasia.
That would be quite interesting, yeah. I think that could probably work quite well.
Well, you say that, but it's your planes that are doing the bombing.
Yeah, this is ultimately one of those really difficult things to look at, because obviously the way that Jiro is he's not really the biggest fan of war, but he feels that the only thing... He wants to make planes because he thinks that they are a sort of a beautiful art form, but then they're being used for war, and that's just not necessarily fun. Horikoshi actually stated very openly in his personal diary, well, not very openly, but in his personal diary, there's an excerpt that basically shows that he was very strongly opposed to what he saw as the futile war of the Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, when we awoke on the morning of December the 8th, 1941, we found ourselves without any foreknowledge to be embroiled in war. Since then, the majority of us who had truly understood the awesome industrial strength of the United States never really believed that Japan would win this war. We were convinced that surely our government had in mind some diplomatic measures which would bring the conflict to a halt before the situation became catastrophic for Japan. But now, bereft of any strong government, moved to seek a diplomatic way out. We are being driven to doom. Japan is being destroyed. I cannot do anything other but to blame the military hierarchy and the blind politicians in power for dragging Japan into this hellish cauldron of defeat. So, yeah, he was, I think, very frustrated about everything, because obviously all he wanted to do was to make planes. And he ended up having to be involved in an awful, futile war.
Well, we're getting closer and closer to the end of the film, and it all seems happy and sappy right now, but I'm watching you, Miyazaki. Yeah, the sword of Damocles is hanging above Naoko's head.
Yes, and we are getting dramatically close to that moment.
Celebration? Did I miss something?
Celebrating Jiro's new prototype aircraft, the Mitsubishi A5M. So hopefully that is the one that will be a success, and obviously if you know your history, it was the world's first monoplane shipboard fighter to enter service, and the direct predecessor to the Mitsubishi A6M0, which I think is one of the most famous Japanese planes of World War II.
Oh boy, here we go.
Yep.
She said she was only going for a walk, though.
Yeah, that probably wasn't quite all that true.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And I think it's this bit that largely is what hits me quite hard.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had to go off to uni while my granddad was bedridden, and thankfully I didn't see him in his last few days, because I know that he did get worse, and I know that it wasn't pleasant to see. So obviously in that sense it's getting to remember him as he was, more so than obviously what happened. And obviously it's something that's just really hard when you think about it. Obviously, the only reason that I'm saying about this now is because I have moved on now, but it is those types of things where you look at those moments and you just think, oh god, that brings back those memories. And obviously watching this so soon after my granddad passed, it was, yeah, you can tell why it hit me quite so hard.
Yeah, very much so. You were... I don't really want to intend this as a backhanded compliment, but you were lucky, because my granddad suffered from dementia, and most likely didn't know who he was when he passed.
Oh yeah, well, it's just furthering on that, my other granddad now has dementia and Alzheimer's. So, double bill! But that's just the way life is. Something that you might not have noticed in that sequence was there was a sudden gust of wind, which ultimately suggests Naoko's passing.
Yeah. And it was very telling that he didn't bother to watch his pride and joy make a safe landing.
Yeah. And now we pretty much go to the summer of 1945, where Japan has lost World War II and has been devastated by air raids.
I wouldn't recommend making a double bill out of this and Grave of the Fireflies.
Definitely not.
Yeah, you welcome on your work, Jiro. You may not be the guy who created the nuclear bomb, the destroyer of worlds, but most of this was in part due to your creations. Ooh. Well, at least he achieved his dream of creating a really, really good aircraft.
And as Caproni's going to say, he achieved his dream of building beautiful planes. And while obviously they're involved in atrocities, that's just part of life.
Oh, don't do this, please. Oh, ah! So is Jiro dead at this point?
No, this is him having one of his dream sequences, effectively. Jiro Horikoshi didn't die until 1982. Obviously, he didn't have this relationship. This is fictional, although obviously it is based on Tatsuo Hori's wife and his relationship. But yeah, this is just a dream.
One last fancy, I suppose.
Indeed. And I would draw everyone back to that poetic line that started the film. Le vent se lève, il faut tenter de vivre. The wind rises, we must try to live. And that is the end of The Wind Rises.
Oof, boy. That was heavier than I was expecting, and I feel because it's a bit meatier than most Ghibli films, not just in terms of length, but in like content
Oh, yes.
and emotions and writing, that I don't think this will be for everyone.
Oh, no.
As such, I'm going to give it an A minus. I like the characters. The story of Jiro and Naoko was beautiful. Like the scenery porn and just the aeroplane designs and focus on just the joy of flight and the mechanics of building an airplane was just fascinating. And the animation was pretty damn good.
Oh, hell
Music,
yes.
great. The cast was pretty good as well. But yeah, there's just something that stops it from being an A for me, but I can recognise why a lot of people call this Hayao Miyazaki's magnum opus. There's a lot of love here, there's a lot of passion, attention to detail, and It may not be for everyone, but I enjoyed it. What's your take?
Oh, hell yes. I mean, I would say pretty much exactly the same. I would say that it does rank slightly higher for me. I would give it an A, I think.
Okay.
Because I think part of that is because it does just hit me right in the heart. And it touches very maturely on a number of issues that many people go through in life, and its overall message of we must try to live is a truly important one and a truly beautiful one, and it was Miyazaki's wonderful swan song. I just hope that his next film, which is potentially likely to be his last, is at least as good as The Wind Rises, because it's a beautiful film and it breaks my heart, and I love that.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta be sad so you can be happy again, I suppose.
Exactly.
Alright, we're gonna leave it there, guys. Thank you so much for listening to our commentary of The Wind Rises. Join us tomorrow for the penultimate audio commentary of the HellfireComms Ghiblithon, when we tackle The Tale of Princess Kaguya. See you then.